Hey, good morning, guys, and welcome to podcast 6 in Just Hospitality with Simon and Victoria. The weeks are certainly flying by. We're on week 6 now, and it's fair to say we missed out last week. Both Victoria and I were really busy. We had a lot of things to do, and rather than try and cram in a subject that is so important, we said to each other, let's just push it out a few days. I'm sure we will be forgiven by whoever's listening. What was really cool is we picked a subject last time, which was nurturing your talent or your A players, the top tier of the talent in the business, how to attract them, how to retain them, how to motivate them, how to lead them. But the subject was so big, we decided to split it in half, if you remember rightly. And part one, it got some really good reception, actually. It got some good dialogue going. I had quite a few private messages. And one, Victoria, I forgot to mention this to you. I've got to address something here. 2 separate people have asked me what I meant by deep cross collaboration, and have asked me to clarify. There's nothing super scientific about what I was trying to say there. I think this stems from, in the past, organizations tend to be built into silos where you have operations and marketing and HR and finance, all these departments. And that seems to be an organizational structure stemming from the 70s and 80s. Now, the structures are still in play, but the businesses that really succeed are the ones that break down the walls and break down the barriers, where everybody understands the values of other people's work, understands that everybody's small contribution leads to the wider contribution and the betterment of the business. That, to me, led to me thinking this is, deep cross collaboration, understanding other people's roles, the empathy around other people's challenges. Us as operators in particular are very, very quick to, think we're the ones on the front line, we're the customer facing guys, we're the hardest working. But, without marketing driving the teams in the doors, driving customers in the doors, without finance paying the bills, without IT making sure we can work, without HR providing us a pipeline of team members, none of it works. It's like a restaurant. I used to always say to people, the last person I want to leave in a restaurant ever is the kitchen porter, because without him, we're dead in the water,
Yeah.
So to me, deep cross collaboration is very important. And when we refer it to talent and A players, it really comes from understanding where people's skills lie and utilizing them wherever they are, despite their job role. So I just wanted to clarify that, because a couple of people had just pinged me and said, love the phrase, what did you mean? They might have been looking for something a little deeper and a bit more philosophical, but that's kind of where I came from. So we're about to run into the start of session 2. Victoria, is there anything you want to throw in there before we kick off?
No, just thank you again, obviously, for everybody's support, liking, sharing, etc. And personal apology as well for missing last week. Like you say, it's like life gets in the way. Rather than rush, we wanted to make sure we did this properly. So hold our hands up. Sorry, we missed 1 week. Hopefully, it won't happen again.
Well, I'm sure we'll be forgiven, but All right, so we're talking about talent again, Victoria. We're talking about nurturing our A players and, defining A players by the top tier of talent in your business, the guys that really shift the needle commercially for you guys. That's what we really want to focus on. And one thing hit us this week while we've been passing our notes back and forward is talent's not easy to manage, okay? Talent, the uber talented, the uber intelligent, they tend to come with personality quirks and traits, and if you're looking for the steady eddies, the people who will maintain the status quo, the soldiers of your business, that's fantastic. And every business does need that set of people. But
Agreed.
For our purposes, we're talking about those high flyers. And in my experience, they always come with a little baggage. They're always a bit quirky, a bit of fun to work around. So as a leader of this team of people, particularly if you've got 5 or 6 of these guys reporting to you, it can be a hell of a headache, to be honest with you, Victoria, but in the funny sense of the word. The first thing you have to do as a leader, if you ask me, is to understand this, to understand that the balance of talent is challenge, and it's not going to be easy. And you have to embrace that, and embrace that as a leader in terms of the fun of it and the excitement of it and the challenge to yourself of managing these type of people. You know, the key instrument to working with these guys is to understand each personality separately and not approach every situation and every person the same. Learning styles amongst A players differ massively. For example, I had a lady who worked with me who was, I'd argue, the best marketeer I've ever seen, but just only could be dealt with in a certain way. And that is, she wanted constant learning. It had to be visual learning, and it had to be a lot of, she would take in the visual and then want to talk about it, and that's how she'd learn. And when I discovered that, it was like unlocking a door. It was like, because what I got in return and what the business got in return was absolutely enormous. Mm-hmm. So my first recommendation would be, make sure you're addressing everybody individually and you're taking the time to learn their individual learning styles. You know, what do they need? Because we talked last week about keeping A players interested by keeping them learning. So learning, understanding people's learning styles has got to be the key part of that. Moving on to that, you have to understand that they will need different ways of communicating than your standard soldier who is just a steady Eddie and working away. How do they like to be communicated with? When do they like to be communicated with? What hours do they generally keep? I've worked with some really talented people who are absolutely hopeless before noon, you know, but they'll be pinging you email after email at 11 o'clock at night because that's where their creative kicks in. I'm reverse. I work brilliantly from sort of 5 till about 9 in the morning. I love it. That's my high energy time, weirdly. So everybody has a different way of being about them, and everyone needs communicating in a different way. And as a leader, you just have to flex yourself. You can't take a one-size-fits-all approach to that. The key will also be when these quirks that are quite often amusing and quite often endearing become a little bit more challenging, how are you going to deal with that? I've worked with quite a lot of A players who can be quite confrontational, can be quite difficult if they don't get their own way. Sorry, I had to pause there because I had an image of about 3 different bosses of mine in the past laughing at that sentence when I said it can be a bit difficult when they don't get their own way. But they can be a challenge. They can act up a little bit if things aren't going their way. And you need to understand that is just the counterbalance on the seesaw for that talent. And you need to learn and understand beforehand, how are you going to manage that? And finally, and of critical importance, your main role as a leader really is to keep a happy, harmonious and productive team. Okay? Mm-hmm. If your A players start becoming a challenge, how does that impact their interaction with the other team members? Particularly, and this I can draw on personal examples where I've seen really talented individuals become frustrated and even potentially verbally aggressive with those in the team they don't feel are either pulling their weight, have the best interest of the business at heart, are working hard enough, or sharing the same sort of talent. It's your job as a leader to temper that and to moderate that and to make sure everyone is obviously treated with respect and care, but also to tone down the A players' anguish without extinguishing their fire. And that's really, really important. You know, it's never going to be easy managing clashes of talent, but honestly, if you're confident enough in your own leadership abilities and your own talent, it actually becomes quite a fun challenge, you know. And what you do tend to find, my final piece on this would be, A players tend to know their own quirks. They seem to be quite self-aware. And when someone's self-aware, sometimes you just need to remind them that they may be stepping over the boundaries a little bit and to come back into the family fold. That's kind of my take on dealing with the outliers, the crazies, the difficults. You know, I love these people. I I get a real buzz out of working with people like this. Not everyone does, so you have to work out if it's for you or not.
Yeah, no, and everything you said there, so I completely agree with. And I think kind of the way that I would summarize it is nothing good comes easy. So if you've got good talent, there are going to be challenges with it, because it's just a kind of across talent, people, things, everything in life, nothing that's great is easy. Running your own business, it's difficult, but the rewards are excellent. And again, managing these people can be difficult, but the rewards are brilliant. They're there for you to take. So yeah, I think you'll have those individual things. Another key point I took away there, and I think this has been a theme throughout a lot of our podcasts when we've spoken about people side, is look at it on an individual basis. Like you said, you cannot have a one-size-fits-all strategy, approach, method. Everybody is individual. Everyone has their own learning styles, etc. And you just have to take the time, talk to them, understand them, and then work with them, as opposed to any other way.
Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And that kind of leads us nicely. You've done a beautiful little segue there into the next bit of this, which is leading talent under stress and duress. And in many respects, we're fortunate because we have a very live example that's just, happened to us over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's really easy. Any job's really easy under normal times. You can settle into a rhythm, you can settle into a pattern of meetings and the way you work. But what do you do when things get really difficult? How do you manage any situation? Let's talk about going into COVID and the messaging that was coming out from the government, the things we're seeing on the TV, and there was a lot of mixed message at the beginning. How do you, as a leader, cope with that? But to be more specific, how do you continue your great work of managing, nurturing, and developing a team of serious talent when you're getting hit by waves from all sides? It's easy to row on a calm sea, but what do you do about that? I mean, it becomes a real challenge for me. The key part of any leadership, particularly and most importantly when you're under stress and duress, is remain consistent. Okay, focus on keeping the messaging clear and the same, because whatever's hitting you, you can't afford to rock the boat anymore. You just must continue down the same road. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that absolutely that is key. So for me, it's communication. So inevitably, when you had, like you said, a very recent example, things like COVID hit, you don't have necessarily the time and the structure of those meetings that you had before to focus on developing that talent, focus on people at the A players learning. So you have to hold your hands up and say, look, because of what's happening, we cannot allow you this budget for these courses, etc., that we were going to take on. We cannot allow this time. We need to have all hands on deck. We need to focus our time elsewhere. But the key is that you don't just bury your head and forget about it and just say, all hands on deck, let's go. You need to address it. And you need to communicate, you need to acknowledge, right, we don't have the time, we don't have the money, we need to do this, and get the message out there. And people will take that on board and be happy that you said, right, okay, we're not being able to progress this learning now, but when everything is back to normal, we will progress it and we may even be able to do more. But just acknowledging that fact rather than just ignoring, yeah, your learning is really important, but this is more important, so now I'm going to ignore it. Just actually acknowledging it and sending out one simple email, really sorry, L&D's having to take a back seat right now, but we will refocus, and trust us, we are still on the same path. We do want your career to go in the direction it was, and we do want you to go in the direction you were with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's communication is key. Consistency of communication is utmost. And I think something to add there is there's different types of stress a leader may be under. He might be under massive commercial pressure. He might be under concerns about his own job himself, or herself. There's a lot that can bring them. Segmentation of your tasks and your people is very important. You must, when you're walking in a room with your team, you must cast off the backpack of your own stresses and strains and continue to lead as you always have done. Far easier said than done. Okay, It is, but ultimately, if you're paid to be a leader, and you've taken on that mantle, you need to be able to do certain things that aren't easy. You know,
Yeah.
anything's easy when everything's going right. It's when it becomes difficult that it's hard. And I'm with you that communication to your team is important. Just before I hand back over to you, Victoria, you talked there about training, and I think it's a really key point, and it's slightly unrelated. But how many times have you seen a business you've been involved in when budgets get hard, sales don't meet the budget or start slipping, or profitability is a challenge? The first thing that gets cut out of the budget is training.
Yeah.
Okay. That strikes me as monstrous and absolute short-termism. And I know there's an argument that, you know, sometimes you do have to think short-term in business, but in reality, can you think of a better time to invest in your team's development, particularly with relation to customer service skills, than when you need more revenue in the business? There isn't a better time to polish that. So if you're going to take budget cuts into consideration, don't cut the training of the people who deliver your money. It's counterproductive.
Yeah, exactly. It's not working. We're not getting the customers through the door, perhaps because they're not happy with the service. So let's cut back on service training. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It definitely shouldn't be the first thing to go. Unfortunately, sometimes it's inevitable. It may not be the first thing, but it's one of many things that goes. But yeah, if you can hold on to it as a leader and eliminate other elements, definitely do that. Because it will help you to retain those good stuff, which, another smooth segue, takes me on to our next topic, which is keeping talent. And obviously we touched on kind of retention in one of our earlier podcasts, and how to keep people in the business. And I think the key with keeping these kind of A-player talent, and you mentioned, is to keep them interested, keep them learning, and keep them active. You need to make sure that they're engaged in their day-to-day work, but they're engaged in their learning, they're engaged in their career and their journey. And like I said, I don't want to go over too much things that we have talked about before, but it is all interlinked. It is this whole circle of recruitment, training, learning, development, and retention. So it does all kind of go in together. I think with retention of talent and keeping people engaged, again, communication is key. Make sure at all times you understand where your talent wants to go, because their journeys will change. They will come into your business and think, I want to go in this direction. 6 months, a year, 2 years, however long later, they could want a change of direction. So that's why it's important that you constantly communicate with this talent to make sure that everybody's still on the same page. What you're giving them is what they need, and what they're giving you is what you and your business needs, and you're working together towards that same goal. And we mentioned that again last time, the communication and the goal that you're all working towards, what their learning journey does for your business, making sure they understand that and they can see where it's going to go and where it fits into the bigger picture, will be key to keeping them interested and engaged. And another point you picked up on, Si, was constantly keeping people engaged in new projects and different ideas, different things. Now, you may not always have the budgets or the possibilities to actually execute these projects, but if you're one of your A players is really interested in something and they've got the time and the bandwidth to do it, allow them to go off and research it for the potential of the project in the future. These things don't always have to cost money. It's just sometimes they just cost time. So making sure that you've got them engaged in the project, even if it's not active, but it's it's almost proactive. So they're preempting what could happen in the future by doing this research, will be another key element to keeping them with your business and on that journey and on that one vision as to where you're all going together. Have you got anything to add to that, Si?
Yeah, just a little bit there. There's a bit, look, you've covered the points nicely, and there's something we didn't talk about, you and I, prior, but it's worth discussing when we talk about retaining talent. There is a financial aspect there. And I want to offer a note of caution on that And we were advised this by, there's this great coach from the US called Marshall Goldsmith, and he's absolutely adamant that what happens is somebody needs more money, so you promote them because it slides them up the necessary grade within the HR structure, whatever it needs. But that's actually not necessarily the best thing, because just give them the money is the philosophy if you want to retain them, because what makes you great at this job doesn't necessarily make you great at this job. So you can over promote someone, make them unhappy, make the business suffer, all because you want to retain them. The utilization of pay rises, of bonuses, of perks, of gifts can be utilized very well. It doesn't have to be a promotion. I'm not saying don't promote, of course. We should promote. It's the best thing in the world to do. But don't promote just to give someone a pay rise. Promote them when they're ready to do that job and will love doing that job. If someone needs a pay rise, give them a pay rise. If they're being poached from somewhere else and they're a great asset to your team and they're delivering money into your team that no one else could, give them the bloody money. It's never going to cost you that much money. That's my point on retention, really. And it's interesting. You and I have talked retention. We've done a whole podcast on it and we've talked about it nearly every week, but we've never talked money because it is the lowest point. It's probably the smallest point, but it is worth mentioning. Yeah, that's my bit on retention, really.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So I mean, people, and I always say, pay your people their worth, and then money won't be an issue. Don't pay them what market rate is. Don't pay them what you think you can get with them for. Pay them what they're worth. And if they are worth that additional pay rise, then like you say, give it to them. So there doesn't need to be the promotion linked to it. Absolutely agree.
Agreed.
Okay. Great. So next topic we were talking about, obviously we've got our A players, we've spoken about leading them under stress, keeping them. But what do we do when it's time to part, Si?
What do we do when it's time to say goodbye?
I won't sing.
Pardon?
I won't sing. Yeah,
it was in my head as well. All right. Yeah. I've got a couple of points in this, and then I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. The exiting of a team member to me is as important as the onboarding of a team member, because you're never going to have an advocate for your business as strong as somebody who's worked in your business, or as weak as somebody who's worked in your business. And it's ridiculous how many people mess this up. How many people take a resignation personally. You know, look, I've been guilty of all of this in the past as well, and learn from the mistakes they take. Somebody's leaving me. You know, it's about me, and it's not. It's about them and their future. You obviously go through a process. Can I retain you? Will you stay? Is there something else you'd like to do? Is it monetary? Is it about your status within the organization? Are you being treated unfairly? Once you've got all through that, and this person wants to leave, your job is singularly to make their exiting process sparkle. You make a fuss of them, you do it with pride, you give them pride, you throw them a leaving do, you stay in touch, you give them the references they need, you give them whatever they need, okay? And it comes back tenfold. I gave an example in an early podcast where I exited someone from a business and it could have been very contentious. And I decided I was going to make a real effort here, and the other person on the other end made a real effort, and we parted under great terms. The communication around his departure was fantastic. The way we treated him was fantastic. And I bumped into him. He runs a pub near me, coincidentally. And I just wandered in one day with my kids, and we had a lovely, lovely time. I actually went to see him last week as well. And that relationship, he speaks so highly about his entire time with the organization I was with at the time. And purely, I know it could have been done so wrongly. I've recently had a friend, I won't get into too much detail, but he's done over a decade of amazing work with the company. I've worked with him there myself. He's helped them through some really difficult times. And the last 6 months, which has led to his exit, have been terrible. And I'm just left feeling completely saddened that 20% of this guy's working life will be completely clouded under this horrible exit that they've done for him. They haven't They haven't allowed him the pride of going around and saying bye to his team members. You know, there's a lot of stuff you can do. So to me, getting exit right is as important as getting entry right.
Yeah, 100%. So, oh God, there's a pound. I haven't said that for a while. But, no, I mean, when the saying, you don't want to leave a bad taste in someone's mouth. And that last piece will, if you don't get it right. We said before on previous talks, A players want to work with A players. A players talk. Talent, especially in this industry, we know how, let's say, close we all are in the hospitality
industry. It's a small world.
Yeah, we all talk, and we will talk about how we were treated there, and how was, okay, if I've had a great, like you said, I've had a great 5 years with somebody, but then at the end, they didn't really care when I said I was left. And we all had those bosses throwing their toys out the pram, knee-jerk reaction, like you said, taking it personally. And it's not. Things come to an end. Relationships, friendships, working relationships naturally come to an end, and it's time to move on. It might even be that it's actually good for your business, and you need to perhaps look at it in a different perspective. Okay, right, Victoria was great, but she's reached her kind of limit with us, and actually it's great for our business because now we can get somebody new in with perhaps a different way of thinking about XYZ's area. So I think we really need to kind of turn it on the head, and like you say, so not take it personal, not think, oh, all that I did for them and now they're leaving me. Think all that we did for each other when we worked together throughout the years. Thank you very much. It was great. Be appreciative. And like you say, let them move on with dignity. And I have obviously I've had a lot of sales roles sign. You always get a second a salesperson's going to leave, get out. Like, we don't want you don't want you on your laptop, etc. And then the big question, will the bonuses be paid? And that in the industry, people will say to each other, did I pay bonuses when you leave? Because it's hugely important. And it's just, it's another world, but it's just the fact that people will talk and people will communicate, and your reputation has the biggest effect on your employer brand. And this is the recruiter in me coming back out now, side. But again, as I mentioned earlier, it's this whole circle of recruitment, path, learning, development, retention, and it all impacts your employer brand. And do you want to be known as the brand in the market who says, right, brilliant, we had a great career together, thank you very much? Or do you want to be known as the people that, yeah, when you leave, they get a bit shirty and it's not the best process?
You're right. And we can even take that back to a core human thing, actually, Victoria, that if someone's dedicated a certain amount of time to your business, you know, you can view it very transactionally, like, okay, well, we've paid them, they've done this, they've worked 40 hours a week, we've paid them that, but it's done. People don't view their employment like that. People put so much time and effort into their work, mentally and emotionally. Leave it in a nice way. It doesn't take much, does it? You know, I think there'll be a lot of people watching this going, oh, they're pointing out the bloody obvious, but come on. I don't know how many jobs I've had. Many I've left, and it's been wonderful. You know, I think of one company, you know, that I left 8 years ago, and I just look back at how I was treated in my leaving, and it was amazing. It was fantastic. Just the communication around it all, you know, bringing me some cupcakes on the last day, whatever it was just I was left with a feeling that my time with them, which was 6 years, was valued. Yeah. And I was valued. And because of that, I carry and speak a lot of good memories about that company. It's quite obvious. Have we anything to add to that? Are we gonna give the kids some homework?
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Si. It's just do it well, just do it right. It's not difficult. And A players, you mentioned the 40 hours a week there. Your A players aren't the hour counters. Yeah. So no. I mean, everybody should be treated well, but yeah, absolutely. These guys have worked hard for you. They've given you as well as you've given them. I won't start on my whole gratitude speech side, but we all need to be grateful for each other. We do. And we all need to work together. Yeah, I mean, just before we go into my little takeaway side, I just want to give a bit of a summary as well. So first thing that obviously you covered off site is work with the crazies, work with the quirks, and find a way to make them work for you and your business. Look at them in a different way and look at and see how not only you but the crazies and everybody else in the business can take advantage of these quirks.
Yep.
Next thing we covered, just to summarize, is leading under stress. The key thing for me there, Si, is communication, not burying your head, holding your hands up. This has to go on hold, or this has to be pushed back, pushed forward, whatever the scenario is. But just really make sure you communicate and you acknowledge what's happening in those stressful times. What do you think?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You've got to keep on top of them.
Yeah.
I can keep on top of the leadership of your team and the management of your team, whatever's going on.
Absolutely. Thirdly, I want to mention, obviously we covered off retention. It's key.
Yeah.
It goes without saying, communication, engagement, keeping your A players interested will be key to your retention strategy. And lastly, part on good terms. Your reputation in this business is everything now more than ever. And again, putting my recruiter hat back on, we all know everybody's struggling for talent. So please do not do anything to damage your reputation, because it will just make life more difficult in the future. So takeaways, homework. This is always my favourite part.
Homework. This is your bit. I like you doing this bit.
Brilliant. So first thing I want you guys to do is to look at your A players, look at them really deeply and ask them, okay, what quirks and craziness do they have? They might even be things that annoy you, that get on your nerves. And like you say, Si, they can actually potentially sometimes be detrimental to other team members. But what I want you to do is to look at those people and look at those quirks and then analyze how you can all use them to your advantage. Analyze what it is that you can do. How can you harness that particular quirk, strength, weakness, whatever it is? How can you harness it to create a better environment and to get something from it? So just looking at it in a completely different way, almost turning it on its head. Secondly, I want you to have a think about how you reacted to L&D during COVID. So what did you do with L&D? Did you immediately drop it and did you not say anything? Or did you just quietly drop it? Did you actually focus on it? When everything was closed, did you say, right, okay, we can't open. Let's focus on L&D training service, even the things that don't cost too much. What did you do? Just look at what you did, think about what we said, and then see if you can do anything differently in the future if there's ever more stressful times. Also, would love you guys to either sit with your HR, or if it's you that does the exit process, do it yourself and just ask yourself, am I really happy with our current exit process? Am I happy with what happens? Do I give my staff cupcakes or do I just let them leave on the last day? Do I actually talk to them and understand why they're looking to move on? Do I try to retain them, or do I kind of hold my hands up and say, no, time's right for both of us, move on, wish you well? And really ask yourself what you do and if you're happy with what happens at the moment. Again, me getting deep, making people ask questions of themselves, but we really need to do this. And lastly, we mentioned retention earlier. If you haven't already, go back and listen to our retention podcast, because there will be some gems in there that will help you harness and retain your A players.
Brilliant.
Anything you wanted to add, Si?
No, I'm not giving anyone homework. I agree with yours. It's interesting to do. The one thing I would say, we're talking about leading A players. You really need to be an A player to be able to lead a lot of A players. So all these rules apply to the leader as well. Don't neglect yourself in this. Work out your own learning styles. Work out what you need out of your team members and be open about it. We talked in previous podcasts about being humble and allowing your team to see vulnerability. I think that applies even more when you're dealing with top tier talent. They will respect you for admitting your weaknesses. They will respect you for showing your own vulnerability. and it will bring you closer as a team, and they will open up more and help you manage them more. For me, that's it. That's
great
it for this week.
point.
I thought that was a great podcast.
Yeah, and that was a great point to finish on, Si. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, and we will tune in with everyone next week. And I'm going to off air. I'm going to tell you what subject we're doing because I don't think you're going to like it because even I'm not too sure about it. So
Okay.
something I look forward to.
All will be revealed. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.